Welcome, everyone, and happy to see you here. You're not here by accident. I am Alexandra Yamoewoyi, and I'll be hosting Future of Money event with George on the other side of the screen, I guess. Hi there. And we'll be talking about something that's not quite for us yet, because we're the youth. That's my joke. That's my Burundian part of the joke, I guess. And we'll be talking about retirement and the career changes. And here we have several guests, and I'll let them introduce themselves first professionally. There is Heather, Fiona, Ron, and David. I'll let you go with that. Introducing yourself. Ladies first.
Well, I'm Heather, and I am of retirement age, and I keep trying to retire, but I'm in the property business. I've been in France for 35 years, and I love it. So I'm still working.
Good for you. Fiona?
Hi, I'm Fiona, and I'm not quite retired yet, but I'm aiming for it. But no, I love what I do. I've been working for Currencies Direct now since 2010, so it's 11 years. Yeah.
All right. And how about Ron?
Yeah, so I'm a financial planning manager with Accompagnement Solutions. I've been working with the expat community here since 2012. So yeah, living out in the Gers, nice part of the world. So yeah.
There you go. David.
I'm David Vakani of Beacon Global Wealth. I've been advising private clients for nearly 30 years now, which probably should mean I've nearly retired, but I'm not. We've been working in France since about 2003, working across borders there and helping cross-border people with their financial planning and their pensions.
All right. So before we go into the nitty-gritty of this subject, can I just make sure that everybody, the ones who are not intervening, will be shut, just to make sure everything goes well, and then we can get on. But then again, because we're so professionals and it's really just to distress everybody, can you tell us one thing that nobody knows about you, professionally speaking? Maybe a joke, I don't know, something that will just clean the air. Heather, I'll start with you.
Well, many people probably do know, but I was involved with pantomime for 20 years. So having a serious conversation is pretty difficult for me. I'm likely to interrupt with, "It's behind you."
Fiona, I'll let you go. Fiona, can you hear me? Just if you could say something about yourself, yeah?
Oh, a little bit about myself. Good question. Yeah. So I've been in France since 2009, and yeah, love it. Down just south of Toulouse. Love the weather. I'm from Aberdeen, so it's nice to be a bit warmer and not be quite so exposed to the northeast Scotland weather. And what else can I tell you about me? Mad tennis fan. Anyone who knows me, love my tennis. Big fan of Andy Murray. So yeah, that's me.
There you go. David?
Huge rugby fan and actually huge sports fan, and looking forward to the 2023 World Cup already. Some tickets already purchased.
Wow. Okay. Really onto that. Ron, how about you?
Same here, big sports fan, rugby fan, big into gardening as well. So yeah.
There you go. So we're well surrounded then. It looks like I'm surrounded by British people, kind of some of them living in France, but it's okay. Nobody's perfect. I'm the only Burundian. Make sure that I'll let everybody know about that fact. So before we go into that, I'll let the other British, George, going to start with the first question.
Thanks, Alex. So as you know, if you're watching the event, today we're going to be discussing what you need to be thinking about if you're looking at retirement or career changes, or perhaps you've come into some money if you're very lucky in some way. And there's perhaps a lot of things that you need to consider in that situation. So we've assembled 4 people that should hopefully be able to give you some insight on just what you should do with it. So Heather, we'll start with you. You're your expertise is property. Can you talk to us about the key elements to consider when buying an investment property?
For me, when buying an investment property, it's the 3 W's: what to buy, when to buy, and where to buy it. I think property is a fantastic investment opportunity. And David is laughing at me because he always, whenever I talk to him about property, he says, yes, but there are other things, you know, other than bricks. But I like the bricks. So if we start with what to buy, I mean, there's a huge choice out there. Do you want to buy a holiday home? Do you want to use it yourself? Do you want to rent it out part-time? Do you want a house? Do you want an apartment? If you're looking at a house, you've got to think about the maintenance aspect. So there's a lot to think about. Do you want to buy student accommodation and rent it out to the students? Do you want a new build with some of the tax advantages that are implied with that? Do you want a future retirement home for yourself that you can make some money on in the interim? So the one thing I would say is you need to give it a lot of thought, and you need to talk to people who can help you. If we then go on to the where, well, location, 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 as they all say in the property business. You know, the 3 little pigs definitely should not have bought a house next to a sausage factory, is all I can say. But it's very much linked to what you want to buy. Obviously, if you're going to buy a holiday home and rent it out, it's better that you're in somewhere attractive for holidaymakers. If you want student accommodation, then you need to be in one of the big centers where the students come, to Paris, to Toulouse, to the Marseille area, to Montpellier. And if we come to when, well, any time is good to buy property. Buy a few bricks here and there. It's always a good time. Now it's a great time if you want to borrow some money to be able to do that, because the rates in France are very low. And property prices are pretty static at the moment. It's a good time to go out there and have a look. And of course, talk to people who can give you the right advice, because the other part of my life, I run a relocation company. So it means that we know when people are coming to France to rent out property, we know what they're looking for. We know that if you're single and young, you're more likely to want to go into an apartment in a town center. If you're a family, you probably want to go out into the countryside and have a pool and a garden. And all those sort of things would help somebody, as well as the right area. You know, buy it in a nice flourishing area. The other question needs to be answered is, how are you going to buy it? But with 2 money experts sitting, or 3 money experts sitting on the panel, I wouldn't tell people how to finance it. But don't use your own money, always use somebody else's, would be my feeling on that.
Okay, where's the most popular place to buy right now? Where do you see people, you know, where they're coming to you and they're saying, I've got X amount of money. Where's everyone else going? Where are you directing them?
Where are we directing them? At the moment, probably out of the town centres is the place people are going. That's the new trend, is to go outside of the city centres because of COVID. Basically, we see a lot of people wanting to move out, have a bit more space. But the one thing that everybody is requesting now, and it's super important when people are buying, is to have a good internet connection.
Of course.
And that's a big change from when I started in the business, because nobody even thought about internet. And now it's probably the first question. And it's the one thing we're now starting to put on the property ads, is whether it's a fiber connection or whatever the speed of the connection is up to, because it's become a major problem.
And is that just over the last year, or is this kind of a long trend?
No, it's been coming, but it's the last year when people are trying to work from home. that's really made that become essential. We've had people not buying property because there wasn't a fibre connection.
That's a big decision to base on an internet connection, but it
It
shows
is,
the weight
but
that people are putting on it now.
yeah, it is.
Interesting. Because we're talking about the savings, it is easy to think that it's only for elderly people, but I do have a couple of friends who are athletes, and obviously when you talk about retirement, for them it means retiring at 35, more or less 40. This question is for Ron, I guess. It's like, regarding the savings and investments, what should people do when moving to a different country, for example?
Okay, so everyone's situation is different, but broadly speaking, the first thing you should look at is the impact, you being a non-resident, the impact it will have on your existing savings. What I mean by that is that sometimes you go into an investment where you're guaranteed a rate after, say, X amount of years, but you have to stay within that investment for that time to guarantee that rate. The same thing would apply for certain investments that you have a tax advantage. You're obliged to stay within that investment for a certain length of time to benefit from the tax advantages that are available with that investment. So I suppose the first thing to look at would be to see, okay, I'm no longer a resident. How am I going to be affected? Is there going to be a negative effect in me stopping those investments or transferring those investments? So that's one thing that I would definitely look at. The next thing then would be to, I suppose, learning the rules, and that would be through the conventions that have been set up between different countries. So especially if you're, I suppose, if you're within Europe, there's a standard European rule, and and often there is conventions that have been set up between individual countries. So that will affect everything from taxation on income from revenue income from properties. It will affect pensions. It will affect inheritance. And so it's important to get the proper advice relating to that. Also, what I would say is that you're after moving countries, so you need to sit down and say, okay, what are my objectives? What are my goals? And they may change. They may still be the same. If they're still the same, and say, okay, what do I need to do to continue heading towards these goals, these objectives, now that I've changed country, and what tools are available to me to do so. So they would be I suppose the main criteria. But as I said, everyone's situation is different, and some situations are very straightforward. But then you have situations that could be less straightforward.
All right. Can I ask if there is any difference maybe when you have a younger population or younger person, individual who comes to you and asks for advice, and with a different person who's like in their 50s, do you advise differently, or do you have to, just as you said, when you have a plan, it's obviously to each their own, but do you advise differently? Do you speak differently with them?
Yeah. Okay. So generally, the younger you are, the less baggage you have, in the sense that you tend to be starting off in life. You tend to be building your global wealth, as it were. So and again, everyone's different. You have people that come into money at a very young age. You have people that come into money later on in life. But generally, when you start off working, that's when you start to say, okay, what are my objectives? Generally, to purchase a property, so you go see Heather, or if it could be something simple as building up savings for the long term, for maybe planning for a family, things like that. Then when you get closer to retirement, you've generally built up your savings, and now you're looking at ways of maybe you're getting a higher salary. So how do I optimize my taxation? You can say, okay, I'm getting close to retirement. How can I earn extra income in retirement? So you start looking at different options there. So there you can get in contact with David as well in relation to retirement. but I would say there are lots of ways of deriving income in retirement, and there's lots of ways of not just deriving income, but deriving income in an efficient way that will not increase your taxation.
Okay, thanks, Ron. So from what you've said there and what Heather was saying before, a lot of people, it seems, tend to think kind of internationally when they're when they're retiring, or they might be moving back home through a career change or something. And Fiona, I was wondering, why is currency exchange kind of so important for people living internationally?
Well, to put it bluntly, really, it's the one variable that really does affect at the end of the day what you have in your pocket. That's as simple as that. If you are, for example, if you're living in a foreign country and you're drawing a pension or a salary from abroad, then that salary pension is fixed, but the exchange rate obviously isn't. So what that equates to can vary enormously. So it's really kind of it's really crucial that you kind of think about that and think about how you're going to manage your FX arrangements. If you're buying a property, for example, people have, if you've sold a property in one country, you have a fixed pot of money. So if you're going back to the UK, you maybe sold in France, you have maybe 250,000 euros, and that's your fund to buy a property back in the UK. Now, what that will buy you can vary hugely depending on what the rate is. So there's ways that you need to kind of protect that as much as possible. And over the last year, there's been we've seen sterling, for example, range from a low point of 108 up to sort of its current level about 116. So that's a difference of, just to give you a very basic example, if you've got £100,000, that's the difference of 8,000 that would have bought you from the low point to the high point. So that's that's your moving expenses, that's your swimming pool, that's your new kitchen, whatever, that's covered. So those are the sort of things that you kind of need to really think about. And by using the services of a broker, you get a more sort of hands-on approach. They can talk you through the way the rates be moving, give you some information. We won't give advice, obviously, because we're not, we can't do that. We can't tell a client when it's a good time to move their money, but we can give them some indication as to where things have been, where it might go, and you can then make an informed judgment on when it's a good time to sort of transfer. But we had an example when way back in just before, in June 2016, just before the Brexit referendum, you may remember sterling sort of went back up to nudging 140 very briefly, and we had clients who were they have their pension, salary, whatever, coming over for the year ahead. Maybe they'd be looking to transfer 30,000 or 40,000 over the year. They locked in their rate for the year at that rate. So they were able to transfer their next year's salary pension at the rate they'd locked in at. So it protected their euro income, it protected their budget, and it gave them that peace of mind of knowing exactly how much they were going to be getting over the coming year. So really it's crucial, because as I say, it's a variable factor that ultimately impacts how much you have in your pocket.
Definitely very important then.
All right. This question is for David. As a wealth manager, obviously we've seen what happened in 2020 going up 2021. I think my question will be into a two-way. What would you advise people, obviously, for this year? What should they do? But first, I think I will be like, can you even define what wealth means nowadays, basically?
Really good question, Alex. Thank you. And actually, I think wealth is very, as I say, I think Ron mentioned something earlier on. It's very individual, and people, if someone is now coming towards retirement or considering retirement options, which obviously is where we're focused, is they need to sort of sit down and plan and consider what they're trying to do. They have some short-term needs. So what income do we need for the shorter term when the work income stops. What do we need for the next period of time? And I think the other thing that we've tended to say is it's really important just to sit down, seek advice, but also sort of think what you are comfortable with, what are you as an individual wanting to achieve. So, okay, short-term income needs, longer-term goals. Are you going to move? Are you going to stay put? A lot of the things that Heather was saying, are you going to buy a holiday property? Do you want to downsize your existing property? Are you going to travel? All of these other things that suddenly come into real focus when you haven't got to go to work from 8 o'clock on a Monday morning till 6 o'clock on a Friday night. And the key thing there really is that suddenly you're going to spend money, even more money, because you may have had children and all of that sort of thing, but suddenly you've got, in essence, quite a lot of free time. So obviously people, when they come to retire, tend to spend quite a lot of money in the first 2 or 3 years, because hopefully they're young enough, fit enough to go and do things, travel, holiday, when we can all do those sorts of things again, by the way, and enjoy themselves. And they then spend less as they get a bit older. And then obviously, there may be other needs longer term for care. So it's a little bit sort of combining what everyone has been saying here. It's, you may have pensions, you may have savings, property, assurance vie in France, that you've got, but you sort of need to sit down and plan those and how they can help you with your life goals going forward, because it is a fact that you will spend more money in the first few years of retirement, whatever form that takes, than you have been doing so, because you just do, because you can, I think is one of the key things. And as Ron said earlier on, each of these things has different tax treatment. So how is it best to get income going forward? It might be, if one goes, well, I'm going to retire at X date and therefore I need my pension. But it's not always the best way of doing things. As Ron, again said, succession, inheritance planning, all of these things have different features and kind of need to be built into a model, really. But I say it's time, it's thinking about it, and spend a little time just planning it. It can be quite overwhelming. We've seen that before. Some people think about it for a long time beforehand, but the whole features can be quite overwhelming. So often it's sit down and have, lots of cups of tea and lots of glasses of wine and just think through what you're trying to do.
Okay.
So if all of you could recommend one thing that people should do, so one positive piece of action that people should take to plan for their future financially, what would it be? Heather?
Well, the first thing, everybody attending this has made the first good step, is to listen to the experts. I would say to give yourself plenty of time to sit and really think about what you want to achieve in your retirement, what you want to leave to members of your family, and in general, go and meet people and talk it through.
Okay. Ron?
I suppose, like Heather just said, setting your goals. So listing out your short-term goals, your medium-term goals, your long-term goals, and so that gives you a trajectory, a plan, and then get in contact with the correct professionals that will be able to help you in achieving those goals, whether it be from savings and not just getting a performance from your savings, but also optimizing taxation on capital gains and things like that, whether it be retirement, whether it be protecting your loved ones via inheritance, finding out even simple things, that finding out what exactly your matrimonial regime is and how that translates to under French law. Simple things like that can have a very big effect, and people just aren't aware of the changes there. How to optimize, how to do donations, donations correctly, how to transfer property compared to liquid assets, things like that. Often as well, people come over here, they want to set up a business. So if you're setting up a business, what regime is best for you? That will depend on terms of your turnover, your costs, how many employees you have, what type of service you provide. So there is a lot of questions, but you need to be in contact with the correct professionals to give you the correct answers, because they're important questions that can have impacts on your situation on a global level.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Fiona?
Yeah, I mean, good advice so far, and I completely agree with all of it. It's really, I mean, it's planning as early as possible for it. It comes around scarily quick, you know, when you're sort of in your 20s and you don't think about your pension. Do you need to put into a pension plan? And then suddenly, you know, it's yes, you got to think about it. So really, the take advice, think long and hard about what you want to get out of your retirement. What is the sort of minimum that you think in terms of the lifestyle you want? What you're sort of aiming for is what you think will be a comfortable income. And when seeking advice, make sure you're getting it from the best possible regulated experts that and really think long and hard about what you want to get. I mean, property for me has always been a good investment, always will be. It gives you that rental income, and it's something that can sort of tick over and supplement your pension income. But obviously you have to be prepared to then perhaps put a bit of work into that, because properties have to be managed as well. So you have to kind of work out whether that's something that you're prepared to do. And obviously if you've got any state pensions, I've been fortunate to be able to top up my UK state pension by voluntary contribution. So those are things that, the sooner you look into that, the sooner you can act, and it all sort of helps to add to that pot. But just really plan ahead as early as possible and take take good advice from people who are, experts in their field and regulated to give that advice.
And David?
It's not easy going fourth on this one, is it?
Say
very
some
good.
Shockers, something radical.
I can't be controversial, George. I would agree completely with Fiona, Ron, Heather, what they said. It is about planning. It is setting yourself up. Remember, you're an individual, or you're an individual family. You'll have different aspirations to the person who lives next door to you, and do what you plan to do what you want to do. And as I say, I think taking advice, a lot of professionals, whether it's us four on here or other regulated people, I think that was a very key word, Fiona, that you used there, are out there. Seek advice, seek good advice. Make sure people are doing a good job for you, and never be afraid to ask questions, because no question is too stupid.
Okay.
Looks like I'm good. Sorry.
No, go on, Alex.
It looks like all of you have like a optimistic, really point of view, and I'm here for that. But at the same time, we're leaving Europe, and Europeans are known to be, I guess, pessimistic in some ways compared to the US, for example, and it's reflected in the economy as well. Let's just say I'm an individual. I'm French, super into pessimism, and I really want to believe you, but at the same time, 2020 showed me the experts, because now we have really caliber of experts. Like, should I listen to you? How do you encourage me to believe more into what I'm hearing here live? Not to say that you're all wrong, not at all, but to say, like, I don't know, like I don't know, basically. What would be like the sentence that will, I don't know, get me to invest in bricks and mortar, for example?
Well, it's always going to be there, Alex. You can go out and touch it. You can drive past and have a look at it. So that's what you should do.
There you go. Ron?
I suppose, okay, so it is a good question. In relation to what the big thing is at the moment is a lack of visibility. There's a massive lack of visibility. And when I say this, I suppose I'm more concentrated on the markets and things like that, but this can kind of cover lots of different sectors. But there is a lack of visibility. We're after going through a hell of a 2020. We're all hopeful that things are going to start looking up and we're going in the right direction. There has been an awful lot of stimulus packages been going around since 2020. So we have Biden, for instance, which has released 1.9 trillion, which is something that is historic. It's a massive amount. That is going to have obviously a positive impact on the markets for the short to medium term. Where we're going to go after that, over the next 6 months and further on, is very hard to know. But you can plan these type of things. You can reduce the risk if you have the correct investment. Just because we have a lack of visibility, it's not the first time we've had a lack of visibility in the markets, for instance, but we plan accordingly. And there's ways of optimizing. Even high frequency in the markets and things like that. There's ways of optimizing performance. But what I would say to generally, when there's a lack of visibility, is that you play it safe, and we always plan for the long term. We're not here for the short term. We plan for the long term. So that means all type of investments. It's not for the next 12 months. It's not for the next 2 years. It's for reaching a goal that will be over a long period of time. So at the moment, yes, it's a strange time to time. As I said, we don't know what's around the corner, but things will come back to the way they were eventually, and it's just a matter of planning correctly and according to what the markets and any other sector. It's just making sure that you make the right choices.
Okay. Fiona, I guess the currencies is a different world itself. What would you say?
I'm sorry?
The currencies are really flexible as well. What would you say about, like, for someone who wants to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, at the moment we're seeing quite a significant increase in sterling has moved up against the euro in the recent weeks. And obviously a lot of that is down to the way that the UK has handled the vaccination rollout program. So it's really kind of bringing back a lot of confidence into the UK market, and obviously within Europe, there's less confidence. The vaccination rollout has been a lot slower, and so that's having an impact. So yes, it's absolutely reflected, and that's the thing to. That's why we always say, well, the markets there's all different factors will affect currencies. It's not necessarily a case of things going well in the UK that bounces sterling. It could be just a case of things are going less bad in the UK than they are everywhere else. So it's just a case of knowing what's going on and how that impacts. But yeah, it's the same in the US. I mean, in the last year, we've had a massive drop in the dollar. It was around about 92 cents this time last year. It's struggling to get up to about 84 at the moment. But now that obviously we're seeing the steps that Biden's taken, we are seeing a definite kind of gradual increase in the strength of dollar again. So it's crucial. Yeah. And these things we can't, as a broker, we can't do anything about what happens on the markets, but we can at least sort of, you can at least take steps to work around it and time your transfers to the best advantage, to your best advantage. But yeah, it's absolutely, all has a bearing on the currency markets.
David, you're not forgetting.
I think I started work about 2 weeks before the stock market crash in 1987. Which obviously for some people on here it just didn't even exist, but it was quite a sort of dramatic time. And then since the end of 1987, when that was, we've had all sorts of different stock market crashes, countries going bankrupt. We had 9/11, we've had the credit crunch collapse, we've now had a pandemic, we've had wars, we've had all these sorts of negative things. But fundamentally over time, if stock markets, if they're any barometer of anything, have gone up. So the economies are kind of okay. There are always going to be problems. There'll be big pitfalls in the road, big issues. But actually, the one thing I think I've learned, and a lot of long-termism is a really important thing. Okay, we need to tie that in with what Ron said. Short term, you need to know what you want, what your income is. Medium term planning, absolutely, but try and be as long term as you possibly can, because generally things are okay. And if you look at all sorts of charts over the long term, things do go up. Okay, things will vary Fiona's absolutely right. You've got to be nimble if you're trading your currencies, because things do move around quite dramatically. But I think it's try and be long term about what you do. Take and have, in terms of investment and planning, a variety of things is really important, whether that's cash, property, stocks and shares, assurance vie, pensions. If you're young enough and want to have a few euros in cryptocurrencies, if you want to do that, you do that. It's not for me. I think, but everyone has different things, but have diversification, have a good spread. And again, go back to taking some advice on the whole thing.
No, thanks, David. I want to pick up actually on something, what Heather said right at the start, that you would be skeptical of her saying, just go and buy bricks and mortar. Why? Why not? Why don't I just go and put all my money in houses and nothing else?
I've had many lovely discussions with Heather about this. So the answer is, I go back actually to what we've just been talking about there, sort of diversification of assets. Have money in different places. Do you want sort of short-term income? Okay, if you've got a rental portfolio of properties, that's probably giving you some income. But you might come with that you need to liquidate some of your properties when you need a lump sum of money, perhaps. That's not always easy to do, or suddenly you need money in an emergency. Different asset classes do perform at different rates. Ron will tell you that. So sometimes you want to be in equities, sometimes you want to be in government gilts. You wouldn't want to be at the moment, particularly. Property does things. So things do perform at different rates over different periods of time. So again, dependent on what you want, you just want to have, our opinion, a really well diversified portfolio of investments, including pensions, property, and assurance vie, currency, liquid currency. And we've always seen the best portfolios and the least stress in people's lives is when they're well diversified.
Heather, you're right to reply to that.
Well, I have to say, although we do joke about it on many occasions, he is right. You do need to diversify. It's not often I say other people are right, but there you go, David. You are right. And I have listened to his advice. I don't have everything in property. At least not that I'm going to admit to David.
Very good. Fiona, currency, long-term trends, where do you see the fluctuations going? Because at the minute you say, the pound's getting stronger. Is this just related to vaccinations, or is there is it going back to where it should be, or is it now going to be overvalued and it's going to come right back down? Perhaps.
I think possibly for the time being, there's no real indicators to suggest that the current trend of sterling and strengthening is going to end anytime soon. But of course, as we all know, anything is possible, and something just you have these unexpected events, political, acts of terrorism, whatever, pandemic, those sort of things that no one predicts, that come out of nowhere, that can sort of knock things sideways. But generally, as it stands, I think sterling to continue in its current trajectory, and we're looking at forecasting to be around the 120 mark in the not too distant future. But it is largely related to the way that the UK has handled the vaccination rollout program, and the fact that they're road mapping out of lockdown. They're looking at opening up much more than we are. I mean, we're going the opposite way at the moment and looking at possibly locking down again, certainly in potentially in France, Italy, Germany. They're struggling. So that's generally the way things are at the moment. It's likely to be more pound strengthening, and we're getting a lot of clients who are people who are selling, and we've had a huge take up on forward contracts, and that's where a client can lock in a rate for up to 12 months. And we've had quite a huge amount of sellers who have decided that they're they've signed the compromise, they've got 3 months to wait before they complete roughly, and they don't want to risk any further losses, so they've looked at locking in their rate for their sell back now, just in case sterling does continue to strengthen the way it does. But as I said, no one unfortunately has a magic crystal ball, and things happen out of the blue that will maybe stop that growth, reverse it even. But for the moment, the way things are going, it's certainly a more positive outlook for sterling than it is for the euro.
Very good. Yeah. One question for all of you is that you've all left the UK or Ireland at some point over different periods of time, some of you much longer ago than others. What was the most challenging thing at the time, and what perhaps would you do differently now if you were to make that move again? Because if we're suggesting that perhaps people might go back to the UK or might move to France with their retirement money, what do they need to be thinking about, and what did you get wrong?
Good question.
Yeah.
I think the most challenging thing is the language. I think that's something that everybody would admit to. You're going to need to be able to speak French at some point when you're living over here, and to be able to get through the administration. So I think anybody coming should really consider getting some very good lessons before they come.
Okay, Ron?
I suppose, the language is a major barrier. One of the things I worked with Crédit Agricole, which one of the major banks here. We set up the international branch there, and it was when we would see the customers coming into us, and the fact that we spoke English, it was like a weight was taken off their shoulders. It's not having the language makes simple things a lot more difficult. Just setting up your gas bill or electricity bill and things like that. So there are professionals out there to help you, such as Heather, and you need to get in contact again with the right people. I was very lucky when I came over here. I was in contact with the right people who helped me set things up, and it makes a massive difference.
Mm-hmm. Fiona?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Definitely the language, definitely. And I think just really one thing that I think we did get right and we could have got wrong was that we decided not to rush into buying a property initially when we came over, because we weren't really sure where we wanted to be and what type of property we wanted. So I think it's careful to take, if you're not entirely sure where you want to be, then take the time to maybe rent and really kind of get to know the place that you're looking at and the sort of things that are important to you. And when we first started to think about moving, I had this idea that I wanted to have the big farmhouse in the middle of nowhere with the rolling fields of sunflowers in front of me. And I soon realized that would have driven me absolutely insane. I could not cope with that at all. And so we ended up in exactly the opposite of what I thought I wanted, and that was in a village. But also I think one thing I think we would have done differently is look more longer term. When we came here, our children were young, they were 6 and 4, and now they're in their late teens. Where we are is we're just that little bit further away from maybe cities where there's a little bit more opportunity. So I would have perhaps if I was to go back and do it again, I would think more longer term in terms of where we want to be, because it's lovely when your kids are young and they're able to go cycling around the village, but when they're want to go out parties and go out with their mates, and there's just not the same choice, and you become a full-time Uber driver, then that's not so much fun. It's so think longer term, and when you're choosing where to go, I think would be the best bit of advice I would give.
Okay, David, a Portuguese perspective.
I think it's sort of, I think generally for people wherever they're thinking of going. And Fiona makes a really good point there, and it's something I was going to say. I think this option of sort of saying, right, I'm going to move somewhere and then I'm going to buy a house. Okay, you will go and buy a house, you will go and buy a property, most likely, but spend a wee bit of time there, even as you say, for a period of time, even renting somewhere where you might want to go. And that way you're not making that huge commitment straight away, and all the expense that can entail. But equally, perhaps always go and see places not in the middle of summer, because everywhere's quite nice in the middle of summer. If you're going to go and live somewhere, see if you like it in January and February, when it's raining and it's cold, and generally going to be raining and cold. Sort of find out, do that sort of bit of research, bit of time. That do you like it in the winter? Do you what's there? Is everything closed in the winter? You can go to all sorts of places, and half the planet's closed in January through March. So I think that's it's not sort of financial planning, but I think it's a good lifestyle planning. And we've seen a lot of that, certainly working in France for a long time now. We've seen a lot of people with great success doing that, rather than, and as Fiona said, go and buy a big house in the middle of a field, or middle of loads of fields, and there's no one for 20 miles. When we've seen things go wrong, that's where we've seen it go wrong. But when we've seen people maybe take a little bit of time to think, plan, and as take the longer view, then they tend to build a great lifestyle and great time. So yeah.
All right. I'll just make sure that if there are any questions, people can shoot them. But in the meantime, I can just ask you something that's quite personal. What are the French doing better than the British? I'll just say that, or Irish, actually, in terms of business and thinking ahead. David, I'll start with you. I don't know.
Great question, Alex.
It's hard to get that one right.
How many people can you upset in the shortest amount of time is the answer, probably. What are the... I'm naturally quite a positive person, and I think there's a lot of good things. I think the nature of being someone that's, shall we say, a bit of an internationalist is that so many countries have got great things going for them. They've all got their own different nuances. The fact that restaurants tend to close at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in France irritates me like you couldn't believe, because I don't want to go and have lunch at 12 o'clock. But equally, just the whole, but every country's got its good things. Everything's got it, and I'm naturally just a very positive person, I think. So I'd like, I completely understand if someone prefers Italy to France to Portugal to Spain and vice versa. But buy into what you want to do, and just don't do what everyone else tells you to do.
Right. Fiona?
Oh yeah, I'd agree with David. Actually, I think it's you take a sort of pragmatic view of each nationality, I think, but I mean the French definitely do better wine, that's for sure. And this region is a great wine region, so that's one thing that's definitely, and it's cheaper. But no, there's just so many. There's a lot of frustrating points. Yeah, the restaurants closing at 12. Yeah, the shops closing at midday drives me insane as well. But you just have to learn to you weigh off the good against the bad, and it's all pros and cons. There's good in both, and I would never discount Britain as a country to live in again. But I love living in France for lots of completely different reasons. So yeah.
All right, Ron, then Heather.
I suppose, well, obviously, as everyone said, the food is amazing here. But not just that, in terms of business and things like that. I mean, you just have to look at the luxury side of things as well, Vuitton and things like that, and also the pharmaceutical companies here are very, very good. France is an internal market, so there's good things and bad things about that. They tend to have a steady sort of economy. It doesn't have the ups and downs of, say, an open economy like Ireland, which when things are going brilliant in Ireland, yay, it's excellent. People are spending money and having a great time. And then obviously there's the other side of the coin. When things aren't going well in Ireland, there's often a potential for a deep recession You've less of that here because it's such an internal economy. So but again, there's the good side and bad side. There tends to be a lot of strikes and things like that, which can slow things down as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with Ron. I think it's for me, it's always been a more relaxed lifestyle in France, but I've probably been here too long to actually comment because I've spent more than half my life here. So, yeah, well, for me, it's just a great place to live.
There you go. All right. I think it's enough. Yeah, we all live in France, most of us actually. So there are good sides. So there was no question. I don't know if George has any, but we can.
My only question is actually to Fiona to say, do you think cryptocurrencies will put you out of a job?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. But yeah, it's an interesting market, but it's just such a, I think, relatively speaking, it's still such a small market that I think it's no, the chances of that happening certainly aren't on the radar for me. No.
I've already had David's opinion on it, so
I
Ron,
hope
what's your
anyway.
opinion on crypto?
No, not yet, not yet. I think it's it's a volatile currency, and at the moment I feel like it's like you're betting on a horse. To be honest with you, it's not very professional, maybe, but it's what I feel. It's very hard to read. So again, it's not something I advise in. I don't know enough about it. But is there a future in it? I'm sure there is. But we'll have to be careful as well in terms of countries, how they feel about it, how governments feel about it, how the Chinese government is looking at it at the moment, because people are often investing in Bitcoin so that they can get out of the Chinese currency, and it's a way of doing that. So will they put stuff in place to sort of to stop that? What effect will that have on cryptocurrency? I know India is looking at that as well. So it's interesting times and see how it's going to develop. But yeah, that's all I don't know much about it other than that.
And Heather, I'm not expecting you to sell your houses for Bitcoin, but do you think people
absolutely
start buying them soon?
not.
You think you might be accepting it to buy houses?
No, I really think it's something that's a bit scary to me. But then it's not a brick, so if we're talking about brick
bricks are
coins,
scary. It depends which end of it you're on, doesn't it? So
when they invent the brick coin, I'll be there.
we'll see what we can do. All right, then. We will finish there. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Heather, Ron, Fiona, and David. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us all, and everyone joining us on YouTube, and everyone that will see the video in the future. So thank you all for watching. I'd like to thank the team, of course.
Thanks, Alex.
We've got Ian, Maiwen, and Adam that do so much behind the scenes that you guys don't always see, but the fact that if you found the video, they had something to do with it, so you can thank them in some way. Thanks to everyone that sponsored the event. So that's all of your companies, Switch Relocation, Accompagnement et Solutions, Currencies Direct, and Beacon Global Wealth. And please join us again on the next event that we do, which we're taking a little break from events. We're going to start another one again in May, where we're going to look at the green economy. So join us then. But in the meantime, we are launching our podcast. So stay tuned on social media for that as well. So thank you all, and we will see you all again soon.